This is going to be a little different this time, talking about some of the future technologies and raising the cyber awareness. So yeah, let's start. Maybe we need to do introduction, right? That would be a great thing to do first. So Matthew, why don't you start?
Matthew Rosenquist. I'm a cybersecurity strategist. I'm also a CISO for Eclipse. I've been in the industry for about 30 years, and I spent 24 of those at Intel Corporation as a cybersecurity strategist there, working with academia, businesses, and governments around the world regarding emerging threats and best practices.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm Carmen Marsh, and I'm the CEO of Intelligenza, the consulting company in California. I'm also the founder of 100 Women in 100 Days Cybersecurity Career Accelerator and Cybersecurity Woman of the Year Awards. And I'm co-hosting this virtual book club together with Charmaine Ten, who is the author of Cyber Risk Leaders book. And
hey, awesome.
Yeah, there you go. An amazing insight from leaders across the world, really, right? I mean, you have covered all the continents in your book.
No, it's impossible, but I try to cover as many as possible. Yeah, so there's at least about 70 overseas executives insights, ranging from CISOs to COOs, CEOs, different perspectives, which I think is really helpful for people who are in this industry. So yes, thanks a lot, Carmen. It's great to have this idea and initiative to run this virtual book club globally, and we have a huge audience here with us, joining us from the US, different parts of Asia Pacific. We have people from Australia, Sydney, Melbourne, yeah, all the different states, and Singapore as well, which is early morning for them, and Japan, Malaysia, Africa, India, like everywhere. So it's great to have all of you here with us today. Very excited for episode 2. And in terms of what I do, I'm an executive advisor. I work very closely with like the CISOs to help them reach their business gaps. And outside of that, I'm the founder of Cyber Risk Meetups, where there's different communities. We bring them together to encourage good conversations and more of like learning from everyone. So it's a community of about 3,000 at the moment across Singapore, Australia, and Japan. And with that, we have our other guest, which we are so excited, but we can't see him. Jonathan, would you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. You can't see me, but you probably saw a lot of me a couple weeks ago, so I'm not worried too much. So my name is Jonathan Hiroshi Rossi. I am an entrepreneur investor. I have worked in business and creating companies, building them, failing them sometimes. We all have to fail.
That's one example.
Which is looking at cybersecurity education and awareness based in Japan, and we are looking to expand that globally. And so we're talking to a lot of people in the African continent, throughout Southeast Asia. We got something actually in Singapore too. I think that Shaman, are you from Singapore originally? Is that
Yes,
correct?
I'm originally from Singapore. I moved over to Sydney, so I'm now in Australia.
Oh, okay. Okay, wonderful. Well, one day we should talk about something we got going in Singapore. I think you might be interested in that.
Yeah,
But,
sounds good.
Apologize, you can't see me, but I can see you all.
Well, we're going to be talking more about your amazing 10 times cybersecurity awareness tour that you just did not too long ago. But yeah, that's you've done some really amazing work raising awareness across the world, literally global. So
yeah, incredible. We have a lot of firepower in this house, in this room today, and yeah, I'm really excited to get this going.
Yeah, so we said we're going to talk about a emerging technology, right? We're going to be talking about something that is if you think about it, we are actually embedded with the AI already, and we know a lot of good things about AI, but they're also the size that it's worth talking about, because we know that every good technology can be used to do bad things if they come in the wrong hands. So that is really something that I wanted to talk to you, Matthew. And last year in the fall, we actually have a cyber salon that we really, that topic touched on AI's impact on the cyber criminal strategy, right? So what are some of those, you call it threat vectors that I know you pointed out 3 specific ones. So maybe it's a good to kind of go through those again. But this
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, AI, we all have to realize, is a truly powerful tool. And tools can be used for good, right? Or they can be used with malice. And the reality is both sides right now, the attackers and the defenders, are using this powerful tool, and it's not going to stop. The tools are getting more powerful and the use cases are exploding, and both sides, it is a new arms race in the cybersecurity domain. And we're seeing it all over, especially if you're a CISO or you're in the security area and you're looking at products. Every marketing person for security products has to now say that they use AI. And most of that probably isn't exactly accurate. But we really see that it can fundamentally change how the attackers come in and potentially how the defenders can keep them at bay. And during the Cyber Salon, we talked about 3 different kind of new threat vectors that we see on the horizon. And the first one really is about a smart ingress. And think about a hacker trying to get into your systems, right? They're poking and they're prodding and they're doing reconnaissance, and it can be time consuming. And they're looking and trying to figure out what potential vulnerabilities. When you put the power of AI, especially machine learning and deep learning type of tools, they can automate that and have a mechanism, an AI system, go out and just at scale and at speed, not look for a few vulnerabilities, but all the vulnerabilities, right? And wait for it too. They can continually and persistently test, and somebody accidentally configures something wrong, or a system comes on the network that isn't configured right, it gives them an opening. So having that automated ingress takes a lot of the workload out of it for the hackers, and they can scale it across the entire internet. So that becomes a problem, and it lends itself to the benefits and the strengths of AI, right? Finding the optimal paths. And when it doesn't find one, right, it adjusts and it learns from failures, and it just gets better and better. So that would be the first one. The second one is really around when organizations are compromised. Think about it when the bad guy gets into your perimeter, or whatever you want to call your perimeter, a system, a server, a service, whatnot. They want to remain stealthy and they want to remain persistent. They don't want to get found and evicted. And in many cases, it's a cat and mouse game, right? It's hide and seek. And it can take a lot of time and effort. And again, the attackers don't want to spend that much time or effort. And eventually they get found. If you have an automated AI system that will continue to play that chess game, now you're talking about a much longer extended stay within a target's environment. And that means they can gather a lot more information, they can tamper, they can do all sorts of impersonations and bad stuff. The third area, which is something that everyday people will see, is really around social engineering. I mean, how many of us deal with spam and phishing every day? My inbox gets filled with, right? Some estimates on some days, over 95% of all email is actually spam and phishing, right? It's a horrendous problem that a lot of it gets filtered out. But when you start applying AI tools to it, those tools can start getting around those filters. And they can start incorporating and aggregating specific information about an individual target. They may look at Carmen and look at her web page and her social media posts and things of that sort to be able to craft a message just for her, maybe from somebody she knows or trusts, a coworker, right? And impersonate that and get her to be able to click on a link, open a file, download something. It becomes very personal. And the ratio of success to failures then gets displaced, and you tend to get a lot more successes, a lot more victims. And again, you can do this not just with Carmen, but you can do it at scale. Do it to 100,000 or 100 million people. And that's what AI can do.
It's absolutely fascinating and scary at the same time. So what are some of the things you could, I guess, advise? I know it's hard to say that even we can stay ahead of these threats, right? Because it's such a race, right? It's a time race here. But what is something that you would give as an advice to cybersecurity professionals, but also just regular computer users, right? web users? I mean, what would you give them as, hey, look out for these things, if this is the abnormal behavior, or something that they can recognize quicker?
Yeah, and again, because these systems can incrementally improve at a very, very rapid rate, it becomes tough. As the attackers shift and you shift one way, well, then they're going to move again. It becomes an intelligent attacker. But from a CISO perspective, it is important to understand that as attacks happen, right, and organizations feel pain, they then realize the need for better security, and pocketbooks open up, budgets increase, and then the technology vendors on the security side begin to innovate as well. So there's a logical progression. The more pain you feel, the more relevant security is. And we are already seeing many good vendors out there starting to hire data scientists, starting to develop tools and processes so that they can meet, or at least at stay parity, remain at parity with the attackers, because you have to. Otherwise, you can just get swamped and overrun. So we're seeing a lot of the big companies and a lot of the even smaller innovative companies use tools like this. So look for them. However, I will give a warning that every company out there, whether they're using AI or not, will say that they are, because it's a marketing term. So take it with a grain of salt, ask the tough questions. Ask them, how many data scientists do you have? If they say, well, we don't have any, they're not using AI. They're not using machine learning or deep learning, guaranteed. They're just not, right? They're using logic rules and some other things, which can be good. For the everyday user, I think the most important thing is to understand that the attacks will get more specific. They will get more believable, especially from the phishing attacks, right? And we just have to be cognizant of that and be extra careful. Everything that we teach our employees and our friends and everyone else about good security practices is still absolutely true. It's just, it needs to be up-leveled, right? You need to be a little bit more paranoid, a little bit more careful, right? And if something does happen, get on it faster.
Love that. You've given really, AI can be such a buzzword these days, right? But I love how you give practical advice on breaking it down so that people can learn how to understand what they're looking at, whether is it really using AI or not. And actually, you answered quite a question that came in from the audience, because people have been asking also, like, when we make a reference to the book, right, in terms of there's this two school of thoughts. So in chapter 4, it talks about, when we look into the future, right, how should CISOs maybe not focus so much on technology, but on the other aspects as well, where they need to be aware of people, process and things like that. But at the same time, it is still important for them to be on top of the latest technology, which was also addressed later on in chapter 5 of the book. And this is one great example where it shows how you, as a security leader, we really need to stay on top of the trends. We need to know what's upcoming so that we can use those tools to equip us as well and stay on top, ahead of the game.
Yeah, I mean, our industry never remains the same. It is constantly moving and changing. And you nailed it absolutely correctly. CISOs have to understand the technology, the people or the behaviors, and the processes that connects them. And many of the best CISOs out there may not be at the very top of their game from a technology perspective, but they get the big picture and they stay current and they leverage the resources around them, not just their direct reports, but they leverage the community, other CISOs, other experts. They reach out and we work together. We have to, because if there isn't teamwork on the security side, we will lose. The bad guys work together. They help each other. They share.
Yeah.
If we're not doing that on the security side, we absolutely will fall behind very fast.
And that ties in very nicely, actually, to what Carmen wanted to talk to Jonathan about.
Exactly, staying aware and keep building community, keep leveraging community, and the collective knowledge, right? Because it is hard to stay on top of just all the latest all the time. So building on those strengths and helping each other, and that's exactly what Jonathan is doing, and he's doing it on a global scale. So Jonathan, tell us a little bit about your idea, how you started building this global community, and what are some of the things that you're doing to manifest that?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that was a great point, Matthew. When you look at the adversaries, they're organized. I mean, there's different categories of adversaries, right? There's the garden variety people who is just hacking, let's say individual solos. Then there's going to be people a little bit of hybrid. Maybe they're sort of semi-organized. But then you have the nation state, ATP, more driven type, advanced persistent threat. I looked at that and I said to myself, as an entrepreneur now, I'm thinking, what's the problem? We have great technology. Matthew, you talked about some of that. It can be used well, and it can also be used for malicious purposes. But you also have the rest of the population. And when I mean the rest of the population is I look at the entire global digital transformation landscape, and I see about 4.5 billion people who are either online regularly or will likely use more connected devices over the next couple of years. And so this digital transformation that's happening across the entire planet, we have 7.5 billion people worldwide. What are we doing as cybersecurity professionals to communicate effectively to everyday people outside of cybersecurity? And so when I looked at that and I said, well, how are we helping departments outside of cybersecurity, outside of IT, outside of InfoGov, outside of professional roles? What are we doing to effectively allow people to understand the threat landscape? And so when I looked at that, I was looking at Japan at that time, and I was running a company based in Tokyo that was doing something completely in a different industry, but it was data driven. It was a data analysis classification business that we ran and invested in. And sort of tangentially, we touched a lot of cybersecurity, but more so on post-incident. Things happen and companies are now involved with some type of incident, and they have to analyze and identify where the problems arose. And in doing that, you have to sift through a lot of data, and you got to go through terabytes and terabytes of data using AI and machine learning, all kinds of different tools out there in the marketplace. They weren't necessarily cybersecurity tools, but they're nonetheless, they have some general overlap. And over the last few years, I would see increasingly more concern about risk related to cybersecurity. And so when I looked at that, I would ask just everyday people in Japan about what their knowledge of cybersecurity was. And a lot of times people have a fundamental misunderstanding about Japan. They see this as advanced technology, third largest economy in the world, but yet there's a lot of gaps when it comes to cybersecurity posture, both from the regulatory, legislative, from corporate posture and risk management. And so then we started to put together, these are seminars that started off as just a couple of people that grew over the years into full-blown summits that we held in Japan as a free service. And we're not a business doing events. We were doing this as an extension of thought leadership. And so I would host and bring in all these thought leaders across Asia Pacific, mostly out of Japan, Taiwan, and other parts of Asia. And over the last 1 year, actually, just as they were getting ready for the Olympics in 2020, at that time last year, we put together what at that time was the largest cybersecurity summit focusing on cybersecurity awareness. And that's a very broad term, and it's deliberate because I'm trying to make it so it's very accessible to everyday people. We don't want to talk over people. We want to be able to allow people to feel included in that process. And then I found that over trial and error. As we were doing a lot of our smaller seminars, people said, oh, well, we're not in that world of machine learning and AI. I think you're going to be too technical. I said, no. We want you to be involved in that conversation because a lot of times, even like, for example, if you're a software developer, you have gaps in your deployments if you're just too far off and not talking to everyday people and the users. And so we put together at that time at the Tokyo Summit, and that was 2 years ago. And fast forward to a couple weeks ago, we converted that into a virtual summit where we invited almost every continent to participate in that conversation to look at the threat landscape, what people are doing in different continents, and we'll continue doing that as we really localize cybersecurity educational awareness for everyday people and across the planet. And that's I think the fundamental problem from a business perspective, for me at least, as a business thesis. I'm looking at it as an entrepreneur again, as opposed to just as a cybersecurity person, is how are we addressing all of the monies that are going into secure, well, actually, let me phrase it this way. So a lot of my friends, and I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley as an undergrad and in grad school, and then I moved to Japan, and I came, long story. But the point is, I found that it's often not the most sexiest vocation to go into educational awareness. And I found it historically over my last 10 years in trying out different businesses is that we tend to gravitate to more attractive business models because they either attract venture capital money. And I've known for myself is that was appealing, but I looked at what were the gaps in just delivering educational awareness. And so what I mean by that, beyond just these events, is the events are more of a teaser. It's about highlighting what are the gaps in the market and what are we doing to digitally how are we responsibly digitally, well, it's kind of, sorry, I have a bunch of feedback in my whole system here. So how are we responsibly transferring digitally? And that was the key thing for us is how are we ensuring that as you are developing more access, but how are you ensuring that people are doing it safely and with the right tools? So you're giving people all of these technology, but not responsibly. A lot of deployment and push from Silicon Valley has been deployment and get to market rather than safety by design. And so I've found it that if we can focus on the end user or people, at the end of the day, it's people, and I don't try not to use the word end user too much, but people as a focal point, then we start to really think about like family units, small, medium-sized companies that are often in the brunt of a lot of these problems. So there's a lot of issues. I mean, I can go on and on, but we don't have so much time, it seems like here. So.
And thanks, Jonathan, because that brings it nicely as well to, when we talk about all the work you've been doing, right, in raising awareness in the community. But if we take it to the next step as well, after, for, all these attendees, right, after learning about the current gaps in the market, how do they bring it to their current workplace? How do they bring what they've learned and apply it? Could be in their homes, to even with their colleagues. And I'm just thinking about something that in chapter 10 where I talk about the CISOs, how do they talk to the business, and they use like the art of storytelling, and it's about being able to change your language in terms of what you're used to, all the technical jargons and all, but how do you actually speak it in a way that the business understands? So maybe both Matthew and Jonathan, you all can share how you guys go about it and the different approach you've taken.
Yeah, you're right. It's so important, storytelling and getting people to understand the impact that has on people to be consciously aware how this has not only an economic consequence, but also has an impact on my family. It also has an impact on public policy. For example, there's a thing that happened about a week ago in Norway. There was I think it's a sovereign wealth fund, a Norwegian one called Norfund, and they were a victim of a business email compromise where it was related to a developmental project that they had slated for Cambodia. And this is a public policy, civic engagement driven policy. And they were looking to do good work on the ground in Cambodia. Now, as a result of not having the proper cyber hygiene, they effectively lost $10 million that was supposed to go towards a community development project in Cambodia. And I talked about, we publish a lot of articles and do a lot of interesting, more thought leadership pieces. We highlight, how are these things impacting communities on the ground? Well, there's a lot of cases like that where you're getting impacts really felt on the ground level because of the lack of either priority on the management level and even pressure from the bottom too. I think there's also a need for pressure from people to demand that we do this. And I was talking to my co-founder the other day, and I was thinking, why don't local governments, and it can be anywhere in the world. I was thinking Japan in my case. They're flush with cash, right? I mean, Japan there's a always like pension and monies that companies and also local governments have, and a lot of times money is siphoned off into these private equity funds or into corporate debt. And there was this big article today that I read in the Wall Street Journal said something about, I think it was $3.5 billion that I believe it was a Japanese entity had had lost because they had invested $71 billion into a fund, a corporate debt buying program. A couple of years ago, a couple of private equity funds came and approached them, and they sort of moved that money into that. Actually, it was a Japanese bank that represented a lot of farmers and agricultural workers. It's one of the largest banks in Japan, almost like $1 trillion in assets. Unknown bank, no one really has heard of them before, but this bank has close to $1 trillion in assets. And they lost $3.5 billion over the course of a few years. And I was thinking about, what about investing in local community-based educational awareness? Now, how do we get people at that level to really think about investing in people? And as fast as we want people to be connected, we also need to have them connected responsibly. And so a lot of my talks, when we were talking about it throughout the continent, I mean continent Africa, 55 countries, well, a lot of the issues are connectivity, something like connectivity, but with that is responsible connectivity. How do we make sure that when people are using internet and mobile banking for the first time, they understand the threat landscapes, and how do we customize local expressions that impact them? And so that means, as a company that does cybersecurity awareness, what that means for us is being able to take content, globally available. We can take existing content, or we can customize and create our own stories, building them into a package that can be delivered and done very low cost, and it can be scaled, and can also reflect the voice. And I don't mean or it's done in Bahasa or something, but does it really represent a typical Indonesian who's using mobile for the first time? Does it really resonate with them? How do we make it so it's impactful? And so that's a lot of what we do as a follow-up with these conversations, is we want to capture that voice and conversation and say, okay, well, let's invest in that. How do we really learn that and make it so it's impactful, and then offer it in a cost-effective way? Because it's not an attractive market. A lot of times people are looking at the biggest markets for cybersecurity education awareness as the United States, number one, and then number two is Japan. Now, what about the rest of the world? I mean, the threat vectors are all over, right? So that's how I've looked at it, and I said, well, let's look at the 4.5 billion people that are just ignored. I mean, the attacks are not going to discriminate and look at just Western countries. They're going to look and see, like, what's the easy entry points, and there's constant attacks going on all the time. So Bangladesh, for example, had something, a massive cyber attack in 2016 where they lost close to $100 million in a single evening, where there was a mistake. And a couple, I don't know if you remember that in 2016. That was, they thought at first it was going to be $1 billion, but it ended up becoming just 80, 90 million. But still a significant amount of money that was taken away and now filled the pockets of some criminal out there. Never accounted for it.
Jonathan, you are definitely making an impact, and I mean, amazing. Like I said, even this last cybersecurity awareness tour that you had, how many countries did you have?
I think we had about 22 countries, but actual people representing and have significant on the ground experience, and it was really beginning, because there was probably many countries that didn't have representation, and so I'm careful when I do that, because I don't want to assume that one person represents, let's say, Kenya. You have one person speaking, and that's not true. So I do it very carefully. I say, look, this is one voice, and it's a perspective, and this is a starting point for us to continue that conversation. Like, I'm going to have a number of them returning and speaking to us again. I have a gentleman who I've learned over the last couple of months in preparing for that event from Sierra Leone. And it's not often you get people from Sierra Leone talking about cybersecurity, but he has a lot of great on the ground experience as a cybersecurity professional doing great things in this country. I think he works for the government. And that was a fantastic conversation. And so we're going to have him coming back. I think he's probably on here too, listening. So if he's there, I think Dorian, if you're out there, hi. You can't see me.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of which, right, we want to open this time to the floor as well. We have quite a few audience. Feel free to just type in your questions, and Matthew and Jonathan are more than happy to answer that. We're trying to leave some time for that as well. So while the questions are coming in, Matthew, do you want to put on your spin, when it comes to AI and risk, and how do you talk to the business about this? Do you want to share some tips about how you would go about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of the CISO's role, for the successful CISOs, they have to be good communicators. because at every level, whether it's the board and you need to have a good communication and understanding of what acceptable risk is, so you have goals, whether it's your peers in the C-suite, because you're going to need their support to implement programs, right? Or the people in your team, or, you know, it goes all the way down to that janitor that empties out the garbage can at night. Everybody has a role when it comes to making sure that your digital and physical assets are secure. So being able to communicate with different audiences in terms that they understand, and more importantly, that are relevant to them and their roles, is very important. The way you talk with the board of directors is entirely different than how you would talk to your team or even other vice presidents, a vice president of HR or marketing or something, or especially IT. And the best CISOs out there understand and have those skills to be able to convey what they're doing, why it's important to the overall business, right? How cybersecurity is enabling the business and success of it, as well as for that particular audiences, their responsibility as part of that teamwork. So CISO and communication have to go hand in hand. Without it, you don't get support and it breaks down very quickly, unfortunately. So, and you know, to reiterate what Jonathan is saying, you know, especially in countries around the world, every day about 1 million people, new people, join the internet every day. By the end of this year, we'll have another 4 billion Internet of Things devices. So you've got more people, more devices, and that creates a massive amount of data. And we see the attackers, right? There's some estimates that by the end of this year, you're going to see cybercrime swell to be between $4 and $6 trillion around the world, overall impacts, right? There's money to be made. There's new victims to be had. There's all sorts of challenges. This is not just a problem for one person, one group, one company, one country, one region. It's everybody's problem. As the digital transformation blossoms and connects and enriches the lives of everybody on this planet, we are all potentially at risk.
I love what you just said. It's everybody's business, because it really is. It used to be IT's business, you know, and that was way, but this is impacting everybody, right? So good point right there.
Oh, yeah.
Any questions? Have we gotten any questions from the audience? Can you see?
They all seem pretty content.
Like, all right.
We put you to sleep? Come on, there's got to be some good questions out there. Give us the ugliest, dirtiest, most terrible, impossible question. That's what we want. That's why we're here.
Yes. They'll need some time. So you guys know, right? You can actually, there's a chat box there, and then you can type it in under questions.
Mm-hmm.
So while we're waiting on that, so just wondering, right, when we talk about the personal part, I don't think that was really addressed. Like, how do we bring this message and talk to our friends around us, you know, educate even like the parents, your grandparents and things like that? How would you start off to really make it simple that will make a difference in your homes?
Well, for me, when I'm talking to any audience, right, if you think about one of our axioms in cybersecurity is not relevant until it fails. And then it becomes very relevant, right? And so if people aren't seeing or feeling the pain, it's out of sight, out of mind, and they're not concerned. So the first step is to help an audience, whether it's parents or children or whatnot, understand what is at risk and what bad things could happen. And when they kind of can visualize and embrace that, they realize, no, I don't want that to happen. I don't want my social media account taken over and people to post things on my behalf. I don't want that. Okay, well, now let's talk about how you make sure that doesn't happen. And you really want to empower them. You want to be that trusted advisor. You don't want to play policeman, or you want to empower people to be more security savvy. That's how we win.
Very good point. And you are a super good storyteller, by the way, Matthew. I know that I know it doesn't matter who you talk to, you adjust your story so the other person can follow. I know you told me that when you talk to your children, you also use association a lot of time, and you tell stories, you know, so it resonates. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Jonathan? You have a really little one.
Yeah, I'll share something with you. Is Saya is the name of my daughter, and I know that's
Ooh.
something that a lot of people ask is why Saya? Well, it's a Japanese name, and she was there at the first summit that we had in Japan about a year ago. She's about a little over 2, and the idea is investing, but also making sure that we don't think about cybersecurity in silos, that it's an inclusive conversation. So when we're talking to children all the way to elderly, how are we telling the story and how are we making it impactful and how we make it relevant? And so what I do in these shows that we have and the summits that will continue is I'm deliberately trying to go outside of cybersecurity. And so what I mean by that is I want to align and associate with different groups and organizations that don't have any experience in cybersecurity. So let's say an entertainment organization that is, and it's not really focusing on cybersecurity, but and even changing the language of what we're talking about. So even like parenting, for example, what if we had investments in hospitals that looked at educational awareness of cybersecurity for every new parent and how that should be a requisite in every single home? But that needs to come from probably public policy and has to be invested, and things need to really focus in on the importance of cyber. So my whole thing is always thinking, turning everything on its head. How are we going to do that, and how are we investing in? So every conversation I have with investor groups that are in Japan, I always ask the question about, what about cybersecurity? You're pouring all this money into these great, sexy technologies. Where's the cybersecurity concerns? How come we're not spending the money into that? How many companies, Japan being the 3rd largest economy in the world, why aren't we spending that kind of money? Japan, like Ministry of Communication a few years ago published a report, their own report said 128 billion with the B attacks that occurred in 2016. And that makes sense. 128 billion attacks happen. So you're talking hundreds of millions of attacks happening. Most of these are automated attacks that are attacking everything on critical infrastructure, houses, homes, companies, SMBs, everything. And so when you look at that, how do you then translate that story into everyday people and how it gets infected, how they are affected by that?
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes it's all about the questions that you ask, right? It's really about having this in your forefront of your mind and then asking the right questions. And with that, a lot of questions have come in now.
All right.
And we're just left with a few minutes. So, okay, tell you what, we're going to be quick about this to try to get through all the questions. Everyone, make it snappy. Okay, so one question from Alan is, how can we join the voluntary awareness programs, to learn and also to contribute? Perhaps we can quickly just give a few ones we can suggest, and then I'll move on to the next question.
Was this to me?
Take it, Jonathan.
Anyone? Yeah. What are the different ways out there for people to join all these awareness programs? What are the good ones you can recommend?
I would say yours.
Ooh.
What was that, Jonathan?
Oh, I'm not sure if anyone can hear me anymore. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I said yours.
What did you mean, or what did you mean exactly?
Because I didn't hear the question, so I just heard you're up next or something. So sorry.
Oh, right. Okay.
Oh.
No, there's a lot of different awareness programs that we can all contribute and learn from at the same time. So what are the few out there that we know of that we can recommend to our audience? So I'll go first. I'll say my Cyber Risk Meetup channel is a good one for all the Australians, Singapore, Japan. It's free for all. So, to join in on, even this will be on the recording later. So you'll be on YouTube. You can catch up to it on podcasts. So there's a lot of good free ones. There's Sec Talks that I know of. It's for the technical people. There's a lot of free hackathons that are also being run by them. Maybe Jonathan, you want to share a few from Japan, and Carmen, I know, is doing a lot of work there. So go for it.
Yeah, well, we do cyber salons. That's one of the things we do. We do a lot of summits or sort of a career expos for cybersecurity, because one of the things that we're passionate about is developing new talent, cyber talent, but also to bring more women in cybersecurity. So we do a lot of those kind of events. And I know Matthew probably has a lot that you participate. You in all kinds of boards, and you participate in all kinds of events in the big community. So I know you've got a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the key, especially for the security professionals, reach out to other ones. Use social networks like LinkedIn and build and connect, because that's the community you want to reach out when you have a problem or a question or you're evaluating a product. Go to the different conferences and make those personal connections, because it really can be a tight community. And the tighter you are with your peers, the more insights you will have on things that are coming, and be able to leverage them if you actually get hit by them. So go to conferences, virtual conferences, physical ones, reach out on LinkedIn, look at some of the NIST programs out there for standards, contribute to those, or at least attend and understand how they're being developed. There's lots of opportunity, and look locally as well.
And if you connect with us on LinkedIn, you will be able to see the different activities we're involved in, and that's a good way to tap onto that. Darius has a question, and he asked Jonathan if Jonathan or one of us can put all like our recommendations on LinkedIn, maybe, so that people can have a quick look at it and access. So we will try to put that together and send it out to everyone. Okay, so that's for you, Darius, and a few other questions that have come in. So I don't think we have time to address it all now. What we will do is we will consolidate the questions. Matthew, Carmen, Jonathan, and I will get together. We'll put our recommendations there, and then we will get it sent out to everyone too. But maybe we'll end off with one last question, which is regarding the AI, actually. So this came from Brian, and he's asking about AI. And Matthew, you talked about that in the beginning, right? Is there any specific examples that you can share of AI created for buffer overflow? So that's a more technical question. And perhaps what is the difficulty level to support and maintain an AI setup for cybersecurity? So if you can give a summary.
Okay, so typically AI is not a standalone tool that you would just simply buy and apply for security. It's embedded within the other tools within a suite. So you may have an AI component as part of your host anti-malware program. And whatever vendor you're going through is probably running it in the background, taking massive amounts of data, telemetry data from all their clients to help understand and identify, tease out potentially new attacks that they can then mitigate and then redistribute patches out to everybody, or sensors out to everybody. So it's nothing necessarily that you would individually create yourself. That would be a very high order to try and do that. And even if you did, even if you created an AI system that would be great at detecting, you had mentioned buffer overflows. Okay, yeah. Being able to then integrate that with the other tools that you would need, the alerting tools and the response tools and the crisis management tools and everything else, then becomes even more complicated. So, just keep in mind, as you go down the road and start embracing AI, it's more than likely going to be part of the vendors, the security vendors and tools that you're looking to bring in and sustain.
Thanks for that, Matthew. And you know what? One last question from Alan. Should government take over the cybersecurity effort just like police departments are doing? I think that's a quick answer. What do you guys think?
Yes.
I think all of the law enforcement, they have to maneuver to be able to help victims, whether it's digitally or physically. So I think there is a requirement there for governments to protect their populace. It's an expectation of the populace. And as we move through digital transformation, as wonderful as technology innovation is, there always is associated risks. So as part of that, a government has a role, but so do the individual citizens. We also have a role to do the right things, protect ourselves, and invest in security.
Yeah, I love that. We can't delegate all the responsibility to government, but at the same time, government is also represents the leadership of the country and the nation. So I do feel, Alan, that we should encourage more of that, where government try to help bridge the gap and offer support to even the private sectors who are in this space and trying to make a difference. It should be a more collaborative effort across all levels and across all boards.
Definitely, collaboration is the key. I mean, everybody's got to work together, right? And everybody's got something good to bring to the table, and we're stronger together.
Excellent.
We all have a role to play. We all do.
Yeah,
we
and
are
I love
digital
what we are doing. Good stuff. And yeah, with that, we have run over, but I see that audience are still hanging around, so they really wanted to press in. And there's a lot of thank yous coming in as well. They just thank you for Matthew and Jonathan for taking the time to answer the questions, and Carmen, for organizing this together with me. So with that, we want to keep the conversation open. Please continue to follow us on LinkedIn. As mentioned earlier, look for, actually, this recording is going to be available on the Cyber Risk Meetup channel. So just check Cyber Risk Meetup on YouTube, and you can catch up to this episode and the previous episodes as well. Or if you are a podcast lover, you can join us just on the audio side of things. This is the link. Again, we'll send that out to you. And for those who don't have that book, you can grab it on Amazon to take it. And then, it's a good way to have kickstart conversations in your own sphere of influence. There's a lot of different insights from different leaders, and I love what we are doing now, just taking it further and expanding the conversation. So you can check it out on Amazon Kindle, or the link is up there if you want to get a hard copy on My Security Marketplace. So with that, we have come to the end of the Global Virtual Book Club. It's been amazing. I know, Carmen, I really wanted to go on. Matthew and Jonathan are
so much fun, and with my favorite people. Yeah, I love it. So thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you for
will.
having me. It's been a pleasure. We should do it again.
Sounds good, Matthew.
Thank you, Shemaine.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you all again.